Remember in 2016 when everyone in the media and politics was obsessed with using the phrase false equivalency?
Because while fairness is the hallmark of good journalism, false equivalency all too often these days can be a fatal flaw.
This false equivalency phrase was used by many on the left when describing people who are critical of both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Their position was that it's actually false equivalency, and from their perspective, Donald Trump was the much worse choice.
When the talk turns to the election, I hear some version of, they're both bad, or they deserve each other, or there's an election? Republicans have one path to victory in this election, and it's called false equivalency. They can't deny Trump is horrible. It's on tape. So they want voters to believe Hillary is just as bad.
But how about the false equivalency of many people on the left now trying to convince everybody that it's actually Donald Trump with the cognitive issues? As if people watching this, whether you're a Donald Trump or a Joe Biden supporter, as if you're going to watch that and think that it's actually true that Donald Trump has a worse cognitive level right now than Joe Biden. Many people are actually trying to sell the American public and the public in general in the world of this fact, and it's laughable.
It seemed like there had been a trend of our American oligarchs getting behind Donald Trump because he likes to make a deal and everything's transactional in quid pro quo. But to get in a room with him and to listen to him speak is to see how deranged and outlandish his speculations are right now, in addition to everything else that he, stands for.
That is perhaps because after nearly a decade of this increasingly unhinged commentary, the American public has become somewhat numb to Donald Trump's particular verbal madness.
It's always so interesting to see how when the media wants to have a message, how quickly they all get on board with that message and how you start hearing it from all different angles. But the things they're pulling for examples of Trump's incoherent ramblings are things like this, where he's just in the moment, off the cuff, saying a name incorrectly.
And we did with Obama. We won an election that everyone said couldn't.
Look, to me, that is not a good example of someone in cognitive decline. He knows that he won that election against Hillary Clinton. He speaks all the time, does all these public press conferences. Watch a podcast, for example, with 40-year-old people talking to each other. There'll probably be multiple times in that podcast where someone will just be thinking a name, like a sports podcast. They'll be thinking Tom Brady, and they'll just say Aaron Rodgers. They know that what they meant is Tom Brady. That's just a human thing. Everybody does that. If you have Donald Trump, who speaks all the time, does multiple speeches in one day, and a lot of times, he's bound to have little lapses like that where he's thinking of the other name and just says that. That's every human does that. If you're really being honest, every human does that. Yes, if it happens that he starts doing those lapses all the time, then that's one thing. But this little cherry-picked version here, that clip was from 2023, September, I believe, 2023. To me, that's nothing.
Memory question. It's like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV. So they say, could you repeat that? So I said, yeah. So it's person, woman, man, camera, TV. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Is it really not that easy, though?
Look, again, that one to me is not a good example. They just don't like Trump's style. If you want to sit there and laugh, be like, oh, this guy's talking about how we could remember 5 words in a row in order, then whatever. But how is that cognitive decline? He just speaks like that. Watch his rally or watch his speech for an hour. That's his style of talking. And by the way, maybe you don't like it. Maybe your friends don't like it. Maybe a bunch of people that you know don't like it. Clearly, a ton of Americans appreciate the way he talks because you can understand it. And he's not intentionally trying to sound smart or use words that only a percentage of that audience can understand. He speaks as simple, really, as he can. I believe I've heard that is like a conscious choice that Trump and other speakers do. I think Elon Musk does that as well. He speaks in a way that he wants people to understand. He doesn't want to sound smart for no reason. And then the media somewhat ran with the story from Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's a reporter at CNBC, who said that Trump had a roundtable meeting with business leaders, and according to Andrew Ross Sorkin, some of the business leaders apparently were not impressed and that Trump was rambling.
on the feedback from CEOs. Andrew Sorkin.
I will say I was surprised. I spoke to a number of CEOs who I would say walked into the meeting being Trump supporter-ish or thinking that they might be leaning that direction, who said that he was remarkably meandering, could not keep a straight thought.
Andrew, more takeaways from Trump's meeting with business leaders. What was the reception like?
Well, it was interesting. I spoke to a number of the CEOs who were at that meeting yesterday, a number of whom, frankly, had been predisposed to President Trump, in fact, former President Trump. And they walked away from that meeting, I think, a bit disheartened, a bit questioning, I don't want to say his mental fitness, but questioning just how meandering, in some cases, one said to me, he could not keep a thought straight. He would go in one direction and then he'd go in another direction.
Now, if this is actually true, that in those meetings, a lot of those business professionals and business leaders are not impressed with Donald Trump, why not interview one of them? Call one of them up, ask them to be on the show. Instead, you get this third-party account from Andrew Ross Sorkin, this reporter. And by the way, I think there's a lot of people in the business world who would be willing to come on a channel like this, certainly one at least, because just this week, business leader David Sachs had a fundraiser for Donald Trump at his home, where David Sachs and Chamath Palihapitiya got a chance to talk at one of these roundtables with Donald Trump.
Behind the scenes, I think that might be interesting for people. So the first thing to say is that President Trump is extremely charming. He connects with people in like 5 seconds. I mean, he meets you and finds something interesting or funny to say, and he's hilarious. I mean, when he spoke in the living room and he talked extemporaneously for an hour, he's speaking off the cuff. Every speech he gives is different. This is him coming into the living room. He had made just a few notes about topics he wanted to talk about.
Now, why wouldn't the mainstream media just interview or even report on what David Sachs is saying here, instead of resorting to the third-hand reporting from another newscaster, another reporter who's telling his account of what someone told him? I mean, what is more credible? The actual business leader here talking about his experience, or a reporter telling another reporter what he heard from some unnamed person?
On a piece of paper, but that was it. It was all completely extemporaneous. No teleprompter, obviously.
So as he said, no teleprompter. And think back to that clip where they're saying, oh, Donald Trump thought he ran against Barack Obama, not Hillary Clinton.
With Obama?
Think about if you were in front of a group of people speaking for an hour, you'd make at least one mistake to just cherry pick.
It was really interesting. At one point in his speech, he called on the Winklevoss brothers who were there. And I'm only mentioning this because it was already reported that they were there, so I don't want to speak out of school. But he said to them, he says, I know you guys created Facebook. You know, he was giving them credit for creating Facebook. And
I know
then he said,
actually created it.
Yeah, but he said, but it's okay. I mean, you guys look like models. You were dealt a lot of cards. You know, a lot of cards. You know?
I mean, they're very good looking. Huge IQ. And I mean, look at him. Great hair.
Yeah.
And then Chamath here, who was also on that podcast and was also at that event with David Sachs, that fundraiser, speaks about his experience with Trump. It's a little bit less of the humor and kind of a little bit more of like the issues that were discussed. And Chamath, by the way, I've seen him as a guest on CNBC multiple times. Why don't they just call him up and say, hey, Chamath, how was your experience with Donald Trump? By the way, Chamath is a guy who's publicly stated that he's financially backed Democrats in the past.
I think that there is a huge gap between how the media tries to portray Donald Trump and what he's like when you meet him in person. And then about the substance, what I would say is it was not just a pro-America agenda, but it's very clear that he was pro-innovation. So he was really supportive of AI in the details that he talked about. He was very supportive of crypto in those details. And he's very much low regulation, low taxation. And so when you put that together, it does stand very much in contrast with what the alternative is.
And then David and Chamath share what I think is the most interesting part of this episode, what it's actually like to sit at one of these, sit at a dinner table with Donald Trump and go around the table and share your ideas and share your thoughts.
Sat next to him at dinner.
Yeah.
And was that like an hour just private conversation between the three of you?
This is the other thing that he does. He actually sits there and he says, you know, folks, I'm happy to continue to talk about whatever you want me to. You feel free to ask me questions, or feel free to just go around the room and just tell me what you think. And what would happen is people would say different things, and then he would start asking questions of other people, and the thing becomes almost like this roundtable discussion of topics from, we talked about Iran, we talked about foreign policy, we talked about
deficit and debt,
like the Clintons.
Crypto regulation, everything.
What did he say about deficit?
So perhaps MSNBC or one of these reporters want to get David or Chamath on their program, and they can get a first-hand account of what it's like to be at one of these business meetings or a dinner or a business kind of related fundraiser with Donald Trump. But I don't think that'll happen, but we'll see. And again, back to the false equivalency. I'm sure a lot of people have seen some of these clips, but when you're trying to compare who has the cognitive ability in this election, who has the better cognitive ability in the upcoming election, I think most people would say the more questionable candidate is the one on the Democratic side. Joe Biden, by the way, kind of looks cool in sunglasses still, but those three clips, that's not just some cherry picking of clips, like one's from 4 years ago, one's from 1 year ago, one's from 8 years ago, like the media will do with Donald Trump. Those three clips are from the last 10 days. So I don't think this strategy the media apparently seems to have of trying to like plant the seed of the, like again, like the title of this video, false equivalency, that, oh, both the candidates are old. They both have cognitive decline. I think most people can clearly see that if you're going to compare cognitive ability, Trump is the person that is clearly going to come out on top on that metric. Even if you're somebody who is like a staunch Democratic supporter, I don't know how you can honestly say that it's close even. So with that said, thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have a good day.